This building in Paris could collapse at any moment. And I mean that in the most literal sense possible, because there's a giant hole under the pavement and the windows are boarded up. And it is not the first time Paris is collapsing. In 1961, a nearby suburb sank almost instantly. In 10 seconds, a whole neighborhood was wiped out as the ground suddenly opened under people's feet. 23 buildings and 6 streets disappeared, and the rescue teams worked for 3 days to find survivors. But in the end, 20 people died and 45 were injured. This was such an unexpected disaster that at first people thought of a terrorist attack or an industrial accident. But the truth was even weirder. An old stone quarry had been slowly eroding underground for centuries until it finally collapsed and took the whole neighborhood with it. And at this point, if you're like me, you're probably wondering what were the old stone quarries even doing there, and also why were they left unchecked under a city of millions of people. So, bad news, and what unlocked a new fear for me is that I learned that these quarries are pretty much everywhere under Paris where I live right now. More than 40% of Paris is built on the same kind of ground and could also be at risk of collapsing if nothing is done. And because we're in France, I have to share a cheese metaphor with you. Paris has often been called a city made of Gruyere in French newspapers, which, to make it clear, is the Swiss cheese with holes in it. And I feel this cheese metaphor makes total sense when you look at this underground cross-section of Paris. So as you can see, the city sits on a dense maze of tunnels and empty spaces stacked on top of each other that all serve different purposes. Some are for the metro, some for water pipes or parking lots, and one of them that's much older and deeper is the old network of quarries. So what you have to understand is that most of the buildings in Paris, at least up to the 19th century, are built in a very specific type of stone that's literally nicknamed Paris stone. The Louvre and the Arc de Triomphe, for example, are made out of it, and if you look at Paris from above, it's very obvious that this type of rock is one of the things that gives Paris its uniform look. And by the way, if you want to know why all the buildings pretty much look the same, I've already talked about it in this video. So having all these stone buildings means that the stone has to come from somewhere, and that's why you have quarries and tunnels. It's not specific to Paris, it's just where you dig up the stone. And if you want to check out one of these old tunnels for yourself, you can actually go to the Paris catacombs, which are open to the public. They are also a giant ossuary, so that's why you'll see the bones in the tunnels. But basically, after people were done digging up the stone to make the buildings, they left a bunch of big empty spaces with a pillar in the middle exactly like this and kind of forgot about it. And here, let me tell you, I'm no structural engineer, but this looks a bit fragile, and overall I feel that forgetting about a giant hole under a densely populated city is not a very good choice. And unfortunately, Parisians had to learn about this the hard way. So initially, people were digging up the stone outside of the city, so when the tunnels were collapsing, no one really cared too much because it was probably in the middle of a field or something. But as Paris grew, more and more people started living on top of the abandoned quarries, not knowing what was underneath. And suddenly, in 1774, a whole street collapses in just seconds. And just to give you an idea, the hole it leaves is almost 1,000 feet long, which is around the height of the Eiffel Tower. And this marks the start of a series of collapses that terrorizes Parisians and makes them fear that the whole city is gonna be destroyed. And this catastrophe leads King Louis XVI to create the first quarry inspection service. And it still exists to this day. And ironically, I've learned that there was a collapse on the day it was created, so their work was really needed. So they start mapping the tunnels and try to make them safer. But keep in mind that their exploration would have looked very different than those shots of me visiting the tunnels today. They obviously didn't have the same safety methods we have today, so we can imagine them exploring with a candle, without a clear map, and most importantly, being scared of getting lost or having another tunnel collapse while they are underground. And their work was so impactful that today we even have a square named after the first inspector with a little quote that means he saved Paris from collapse. But even with all their efforts, Paris was not safe yet. And before I tell you how these old tunnels still impact us Parisians today, I wanted to tell you about today's sponsor, Typology. Typology is a French skincare brand, and all their products are made with the best ingredients. And if you're looking for a nice gift for yourself or for someone you love, you should check out their tinted skincare gift set. product. It comes in a really nice box, and it includes 4 of their bestseller products that work for every skin tone. There's a 9-ingredient hydrating cream, a mascara serum, their powder pink lip oil, which I love because it's very hydrating and the result is both super cute and discreet. Then there's this one called Glow Drops, and I've been using this one almost every day for a year and I really enjoy it. It's a tinted vitamin C serum that gives you an extra glowy look. Also, all the products are full size, but the gift set comes with a travel pouch. At the moment, they are offering a free organic peppermint hydrolate for every purchase over $40, so it's the perfect opportunity to try high-quality French skincare. So the problems with these old tunnels is that they're pretty much everywhere. It is estimated that there's over 300 kilometers of tunnels underneath Paris. That's about 186 miles, and that's roughly the distance from New York City to Boston. So that's a lot of tunnels to keep an eye on in case there's a collapse or another issue, and that's why the quarry inspection service still exists today. And even the catacombs, you know, the famous part that's open to the public, it regularly closes for renovations and structural reinforcements, so it's a never-ending job. And a good example of that work that you can see by yourself today is actually one of my favorite parks in Paris, the Butte Chaumont Park. So I went and took a walk there to show you that the beautiful little mountain you see here in the middle of the lake, well, it used to be like this, and it used to be an old quarry. And they were digging up an extremely fragile type of rock that is used to make plaster and drywall, and it even dissolves in water, which makes the whole area extra unstable. And let me tell you, this is why there are always issues in the park. I think I've been coming here for 15 years and there's always something going on. Like, for example, you used to be able to go on top of the mountain with this bridge, but now it's closed because it's too dangerous. And in general, now you can't get too close to the mountain because it could collapse and fall on you, and that's why there's so many barriers and signs everywhere around the lake, which I have to say is really good for birds because they're able to enjoy the area without being disturbed by humans. But unfortunately, you'll see it's really bad for people who live in the area. So remember how I said that 40% of Paris is built over these tunnels? Well, most of us who live in Paris have no ideas that these tunnels exist and that they take so much work to maintain. And I personally only noticed that this was this much of an issue when I started looking for an apartment to buy in Paris. So in Paris, when you go visit an apartment you want to buy, you get a 100-page file with a bunch of info, and that's a legal obligation. It also includes a map like this, which is a geological risk report telling you whether your apartment is located on top of an old quarry or not. So for example, for this apartment right here that I visited, we're good in terms of risks of collapse because of old quarries, but I ended up not putting an offer because the building had not been renovated in years and looked like it would collapse on its own. Anyway, since it's 100 pages long, people don't read it too much and don't look too much into it, and that's a very, very, very bad idea because you can end up with your home looking like the building in the cute street I showed you in the intro. So what happened with this building is that in June 2020, people noticed that there was a 33-foot deep hole under the building, and I quote, "Now there is only empty space left under the city sidewalk." And as you can see, you can't really guess there's a giant hole under our feet just from looking at the building from the street. So the tip, if you're ever buying a place in Paris or anywhere else, is first to read all the paperwork that's provided to you, but also if there's an underground cellar, go check it out because that's where you usually find the sinkholes. And by the way, this must be hell for the people who live there because this has been going on for 5 years and most of the people still live in the building just with boarded up windows. Keep in mind that Paris real estate is already very expensive, but also when you buy a place in France, you're also responsible for what happens underground. So very concretely, this means that you're the one who has to pay the bill if there's a giant hole under your home that has to be filled. And I didn't find the numbers for our exact building, but this can start at 50,000 euros for an individual home and go up to €1,000,000 for a building with several floors. Also, your homeowner's insurance most likely won't cover it because it's not considered a natural disaster, so it really sounds like a nightmare, and I feel so bad for the people who have to go through that. And I feel it could really happen to anyone because it is really hard to know that this can be an issue unless you know where to look. For example, this is the iconic neighborhood of Montmartre, which I've already made a video about, and not a lot of people know that it would have also looked like this back in the day. But when you're walking in the street today, it is impossible to know that there's a bunch of abandoned tunnels under your feet. And as Paris keeps developing, there are two big risks that need to be managed and that have been causing problems for hundreds of years. The first one is metro digging. So that might seem obvious, but the more holes you dig under a city, the more it's at risk of collapsing. And that's why the Quarry Inspection Service works directly with the Paris region to reinforce old tunnels before building new metro lines. And I found that around 20% of the cost of a new metro line goes just to consolidating tunnels. And they've been doing this since the metro first opened in 1900. The second risk, well, it's a bit harder to spot. It's water getting into the ground, either from rain, from floods, or just leaks under buildings. Basically, the water weakens the ground and also make collapses more likely. So that's why the Quarry Inspection Service also keeps a close eye on groundwater and floods. But according to a building architect interviewed by the Nouvel Obs, which is the French newspaper I keep quoting on this topic, about half of the buildings built on unstable ground have pipes that aren't watertight, so that can make the problem a lot worse. So does this mean that we could have a mega collapse like the one that happened in 1963 or 1774? Well, it's obviously unpredictable, but it's also pretty unlikely, according to Xavier Piccinot, who works at the Quarry Inspection Service. Each year in Paris, there's about 10 issues linked to the decay of old quarries, including one collapse. The other 9 are sinking, cracks, or similar damage. So while the risk is real, it's also handled like a lot of other everyday risks like floods, storms, and that type of thing. Personally, after learning about the work of the Quarry Inspection Service, I don't feel too worried that the ground is gonna open under my feet at any moment, but I will make sure to read every single risk mentioned in the 100-page report before buying an apartment. If you enjoyed this video, I also think you'll like the ones on screen right now, so I'll see you there. Bye for now.